Good afternoon. Um, Hopefully this is our last session before we go into our wonderful gala dinner that's planned tonight. It's been a lot of discussion today, and I think the interesting topic that we will cover now is really to look at it from a financial perspective. Now, traditionally, railways are very expensive. So it scares over a lot of people. So I just wanted to put a bit of perspective on that. And this is therefore the process in which I will also then start with initial questions and discussions from them. As we are sitting here discussing for the next 2 days, there's a major need for railway investment. So I've been with a railway operator the last 5 years before I joined Grindrod. Now, every day there's two things that you sit with in terms of your plan for the day. You never have enough rolling stock, and your infrastructure is at the level where the train sometimes have to move at 10, 15 kilometers per hour. Those are the two major issues. So how do we fix that from a private sector perspective and from a funding perspective? What's the future? How does it look like? How do we plan for that? So if I can just put into perspective, let's start at South Africa. Transnet Freight Rail, Transnet. If you look at the current situation, and let's look at this in a positive light. Transnet has got a deficit of around about 500 locomotives at this stage. So if Transnet has got a deficit of 500 locomotives in terms of operating, what about the rest of the region? So the rest of the region is about the same number. And if you just take the amount of 500 locomotives, want to buy new locomotives, that's about 40 billion rand. Who's going to provide that? The banks will tell you they don't have the money. Just listen from them. From this morning, some of the discussions. So how do you put these two together? And I think that's where I want to start. Maybe we can start with you. How do we put this magic partnership together between the private and public sector? How do we open up? How do we start small? Because this is a massive elephant, a giant elephant that we need to eat. And as they say in terms of the African proverb, you eat an elephant piece by piece.
I was going to say exactly that, Johnny. So, good question. I think it's one of those where, I don't think we need to look at the end insight type of thing. We need to start with something smaller and more appetizing for everyone. I think at the end of the day, any financier will look at certainty of repayment. I think everybody wants to know that they're going to get repaid. So the borrower at the end of the day is very important. And I think it's a combination certainly of private and public. And it's got to be a combination. I think it's one of those where we need to know what is actually required, what is needed to fund it, and how one can fund it. I want to say that there is money available. It's one of those, there's obviously a lot of competing infrastructure projects in South Africa and the rest of Africa as well. But there's certainly funding available through various parties, the banks, the commercial banks, DFIs, ECAs too. I think, again, I'm coming from an ECA point of view, but my background is in investment banking. But ECAs are so misunderstood and so pushed aside, if I can put it like that. And I don't think that many countries actually woken up to the benefit of that. As I alluded to in the introduction, we can do PPPs, we can do infrastructure, and it's getting the right combination, sitting around the table and doing that. Not competing against each other, not driving the price down, that's realistic in pricing for the risk at the end of the day, use mitigation against it. But I think it's understanding all the relevant players in the market, what they need, and how can we participate? How can the DFIs work with the ECAs work with the commercial banks, etc. And then obviously, ultimately, the borrower needs to be, satisfactory. It's got to have financial capital. Or alternatively, you need to ensure that there's non-negotiable or non-cancelable off-take agreements that one can rely on. So is it leasing, is it working capital? It's a combination thereof. ECAs go out to funding of 15 years plus the construction period. So it's long funding there.
Yes.
Commercial banks obviously don't do that, but that's where we come in at the end of the day and provide that.
Yeah, I don't want to lose that point, so I'm going to go to Willie next to you in terms of the development funding. So traditionally, if you look at private sector, they like the short-term funding. But if you look at the lifespan of any rolling stock, looking at locomotives, around about 20 years. So you can't borrow on 3 years, going to a commercial bank, 4 years, and so forth. You need to look at the longer term period. And how is government going to take this in terms of whether there's going to be guarantees, whether there's any sort of agreement in order for the private sector to connect into this gap. So maybe I can get a perspective from DBSA on that.
Thank you very much, Johnny. I think just to pick up on that point from our side, I mean, I think traditional, for whether it's commercial bankers, whether it's TFIs, we've always looked at more at firstly the SOE or with some level of support from the government. And I think for many years there's always been sort of the conventional way of financing. But I think over the years we start to realize that, look, I mean, there's only so much that the government can provide in terms of support. I mean, there's only so many guarantees that governments can issue out there. And if you look at, in the economy, it's not just rain, it's not just, there's rain, there's energy, there's all sorts of enterprises that are requiring that support. So what we heard throughout this morning and this afternoon was the need for private-public partnerships. This was the consistent theme. We've also heard it from the Honorable DG as well, and Rob, where he said, there's a roadmap. And if you look at all the countries that are presented here, everyone is emphasizing triple B. And that is the reality that we face today. There's only so much capital that is available, there's only so much that our governments can do. So what do we then look at in terms of the next level of funding? And this is where we really now need to be creative. And ultimately, when you look at in the region, there's two things. I think, Johnny, you mentioned them. The one is we need the rolling stock, we need the rolling stock as the yesterday. And the second is you also need to address your infrastructure, which is a significant challenge. So what we then take a step back and say, okay, as Africa or as the continent, what are we endowed with? And what you find is the volumes are there, right? I mean, you go to the DRC, you go to Zambia, you go anywhere, the volumes are there. Now, how do we try and extract value out of it? And as lenders, how do we then come to be creative to say, how do we find a way of actually providing financing, longer-term financing on the back of those volumes of the exports? Because the volumes need to move. So you can find some of the structures that I can talk about is where you say, okay, here's a country, you've got the volumes, the mines are there, they're exporting. So isn't there some form of prepayment that you can look at where you can say you can do forward sales? You need to address your infrastructure, you need to rehabilitate the network. However, on the operational side, you do have payments that will come from the states. Can you not find a way of monetizing those payments? Can you not say, okay, GBSA is a long-term financier, can you not give me 15-year money off the back of those contracts so that I can use them to actually address the infrastructure backlog? And I know it sounds a bit simple, relatively simple, but in reality it's not that simple to implement, but in some of the structures that we were looking at to try and address that. Because when you get rolling stock today, for instance, and you have not addressed the network, your rolling stock is literally going to wear out very, very quickly. You know, it's not going to last you the 10 years, the 15 years, the 20 years. It's within 5 years, it's gone. So we need to address both. And that is where I think, you know, as GFIs, as operators, as infrastructure owners, we need to then say, guys, how do we then creatively find a solution to address both?
And thank you for that. Yeah, so what you're saying is the development money is there. The funding is there.
I think it was mentioned earlier.
Yes. So I'll come back to the two of you later as to what's that recipe. How do we put down the most appropriate recipe for us to move forward in terms of the gaps, especially on the rolling stock side. Let me move a little bit to the infrastructure side. So if we look at some statistics in terms of international rail volumes, especially in Europe, that for the last 20 years, that the rail volumes has increased about 80%. This is now for Europe. If you look at South Africa, only 30%. But the GDP for South Africa over the past 20 years has increased by 60%. Now, the Gauteng province being the biggest province, strategic in terms of the development of the country economy. How do you work together with Transnet? Which options do you have in terms of influencing, using your footprint, your power that you do have to take us forward? Can you share a little bit of that towards
Thank you. I think one of the key things is that what is a project, what is an investment, what is project finance without a proper regulatory environment. For some of these issues to be resolved, the environment must also be supportive. And that is where we also come in, perhaps from the Cultural Development Agency. We look at issues beyond financing, and perhaps to my colleague's point around financing, one of the arguments is we also need to move beyond the pure financial returns when we look at project funding. Can we also talk about the economic returns, the social returns, of which some of them are quite soft and may not be quantified, but may speak volumes into growing and developing the economies of the regions and the country. So from us as Gauteng, we are aware that we contribute to the bulk of the exports. We are the manufacturing hub, we are the financial hub, and we move quite a lot of goods from Gauteng to other provinces to export them. And most of the bulk has moved from rail to roads. If you look at the northern corridor of Gauteng as an example, it is an automotive hub, and we are moving automobiles using road transport. What does that mean to operators in terms of the costs that they incur, the logistic costs that they incur to move these goods? And I think those are some of the conversations that we've consistently had with some of our partners in the regulatory space to look at how do we implement some of the projects. And to your point also, there's quite a lot of projects that could actually alleviate some of these issues that we are dealing with. That it's an issue of funding, it's an issue of implementation, it's a combination of factors which cannot be resolved by one particular stakeholder, but needs partnerships from both the private and the public sector to come together and resolve some of the issues that are involved. We could spend quite a lot of detail, we could go into quite a lot of detail if we to unpack some of these regulatory issues, but suffice to say, that we need to reflect as to what has happened that has made us to lose our position from the point of view of the ease of doing business, and what are those issues? How do we address them, working with our regulators to ensure that we regain our position, and we perhaps move some of our export goods to off the road through the rail as it previously was the case. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Let me move to the left. So we just had a presentation about the Nakala corridor in terms of the rail efficiencies, the potential of the project, even to push it further. So if we stay with the question of infrastructure development, that's very different from most of the lines, rail lines within Southern Africa. Now, most of the rail lines within Southern Africa, they have speed limits. So you would find a stretch of maybe 100 kilometers has got maybe 10 speed restrictions, which takes you down to some extent even to 5 kilometers per hour. So instead of being or supposed to drive a sedan vehicle, you have to get now a 4x4, or you have to get a truck just to do the comparison. So that funding or that implementation in terms of improvement is not done simply because the government or the railway operator just simply don't have the funds or it's got other priorities. Now, where can the private sector come in? Even if it is a TVR line, whether it's any of the other operators, to say, okay, we know that for this stretch of 300 kilometers, that only 30 kilometers is a problem. How can we work together with the development banks or any other financial institution for that matter? How do we put that on the table in terms of engaging discussion? Because that's really some of the major needs, because that can improve the transit time significantly. So maybe you've got the right answer for us today.
Johnny, I was wondering where you were heading with the speed restriction issue with leasing. But I think you've actually sort of zoned in on a key benefit of a leasing solution. You know, we often get asked as a company, what is it as us, as Tello, leasing company, add value to? And as Johnny mentioned, there's a strong need for the infrastructure itself to be repaired so that this modern rolling stock and the refurbished rolling stock that we put on the line is used to its effect. It's effectively used to its optimal capacity. What a leasing solution does is, if you utilize the leasing company to lease your rolling stock, and I can go into the details of a longer-term funding on that, it allows you to free up your balance sheet and free up your cash flows so that you can use it to fix the line, as against tying it up into a high-end capex rolling stock item over a shorter period. Because if you try and do that over a shorter period, you are incurring quite a significant repayment. And let's assume you've done that through an asset-based finance, where you have to also put down a significant deposit. You literally, your recoupments or the payments that you're making on that equipment is far in excess of what you are getting a return on. So I think the question is, one really needs to look together with, as Dirk is mentioning, with the model that we have, talk about an innovative operating model, is that we're able to work with ECAs, one, to bring long-term funding. We're talking 14, 15 years funding. We're able to bring ability to mitigate the cost of funding by bringing guarantees from the ECAs. The role ECAs play is because a lot of the equipment that we bring in, whether it's new equipment or high-end spares to fix locomotives that has fallen into disarray, is not coming from within the African market, it's coming from outside of it, whether we like it or not. And that comes with certain benefits that we can bring in terms of funding those type of instruments. So if you look at it from that perspective, we as a leasing company, the value that we bring is more to than just saying that these are expensive type terms of funding. One has to take, I think there was a consensus around this room, that one needs to look at it from a long-term point of view. And if you look at it from a long-term point of view, these assets are long-term assets. We're talking equipment that in excess of 25, 30 years that's well maintained. And the reason why Nankala Logistics operate the way they do is because they have proper maintenance programs in place and access to the spares as well to allow them to do that. And that is the model we need to try to start working towards, where the operators will focus on the operating side of it, and the rolling stock company will then focus on providing the rolling stock on the corridor together with off-takers, but they are the ones who have the vested interest to make sure that that equipment is on the line for a significant period of time, and the operators are on the line for ensuring performance is achieved, as against securing a long tenure there, because you are bringing in rolling stock together with your operatorship. So these are kind of models that we need to start to look at more creatively. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. So we've said, in terms of just quickly summarizing, we said we have the money. The money's there. We said we are engaging, and we say there's operating models available that we can utilize. So what's stopping us? Can I come back to the previous question? What is the recipe for us going forward?
I think it's engagement. I think, and again, it starts today. You know, I think if we sit here again in a year's time and we haven't moved forward, it will be a failure from all of this, to be quite honest with you. I think from a UK point of view, from a DPT point of view, from a UK point of view, we're very committed to the rail corridors, the rail industry or sector as a whole. We want to engage in dialogue. I think that's important. We need to understand it. I'll be, the first to say that we will not be able to fund everything. And again, please, it just is what it is on our side. But we don't fund any fossil fuel. We don't do any coal. So if coal is incidental on a corridor, we can look at that. But if coal is a majority of the transported on the corridor, we won't be able to look at that. But it is what it is. So, again, it's a matter of dialogue, understanding what can be done, what can't be done, who it is, and bring all the players together. CBSA with UK. Let's talk around that. Let's not see it as being competitors, but let's see it as enhancing the economies of the various countries. My take is on rail corridors. It's again criminal because it is enhancing the economies. It's kickstarting these economies. We've seen in South Africa what Transnet's failure for the freight corridor, the failure has brought as a negative to the country. I think we bring so much easier. We just need to drive out to Durban and see how many trucks are on there, the danger level, the logistics on that side. But I think also the important thing is, you understand it very well, is if it gets to the port, it needs to be able to get out there very quickly too. But let's focus on one thing at a time. Engage, with many stakeholders, dialogue with the banks. The banks are there, commercial banks. I'm working very closely with the banks, both international and domestic. And each and every domestic bank has increased and enhanced their ECA process. So they understand that, and it's a matter of time just before we do. Many countries like Angola, Ghana, unfortunately, we know what's happened to Ghana recently, but those countries are built on ECA funding, and it goes hand in hand with it. It goes hand in hand with the other multilateral banks itself. So I want to say, let's sit around and see how we can do that, what the right strategy is. Again, it's critical to finance long-term equipment, which are not working that short. Let's go and extend it to 10 to 15 years, the lifespan of those goods. Again.
So if I can go to really on the same question in terms of the recipe, how do we get the right recipe? Because over the last 5 years, TFR has lost about 70 million tons. So your focus must be deep. But how do we find a correct recipe between the private and public sector?
Well, Johnny, I think when my colleague Davis Kwale started this opening speech in the morning, I mean, he gave very concrete example. They made the example of the 2.1 billion that we're working on with Transnet. He mentioned Transnet is 3 billion. He mentioned Greenwood as well. Over and above that, I mean, as TBSA, we can even talk about, if we go to Tanzania, for instance, the Tanzania Standard Gauge Railway, the TBSA has committed, in fact, and disbursed partly $200 billion, which is close to 4 billion rights in Tanzania. If you go to Angola, for instance, I mean, everyone is talking about the integrated which goes up to the which is quite an important corridor. We find that the TPS is shortlisted as one of the development banks that is working with the concessionaire. So I think that the TPSA, we are there. I think earlier on, when the chairman of Jonah Railways mentioned the Mama Muna and the Parana Railways, I think in Eswatini as well, there was the Transnet Eswatini Railway that was mentioned, as well as the Zambia link as well. I mean, if you look at all those important, as well as Transcabana, so I think if you look at all those important corridors, you find that in each and every single one, they both the expressions of interest that have been put out, all the RFQs. The TPS is there supporting a lot of private sector parties that are in fact responding to those needs. So yes, it's engagement, and I think as the TPS said, we're saying we're there, we're present, and we're available in most of these conversations.
Yeah. So I hope between you and them you have enough business sense. So let me move to fellow. So if I have the authority now, and I tell you that on behalf of the Minister of Transport in South Africa, I give you 5 minutes with the Minister of Transport. What will you tell the Minister of Transport from your perspective in terms of starting this momentum, please, in terms of funding, from your perspective?
I think I would ask one of the projects that has been in the pipeline in Calgary and Inland Port. We have CTT, it is oversubscribed, its capacity is overcapacitated, and we are at a point where we need an alternative. And I think that is the only thing that I'll ask, because currently I know of another player before and I think wherever it is situated, but as long as it's within the area and it helps with supporting the reindustrialization plan of Gauteng. That is all that I think I would say to the minister. And I think aligned to that is the fact that we need to implement. That is very key when it comes to not only South Africa, Africa in general. We will not be able to successfully implement the likes of the AFCFTA if we cannot have supportive logistics platforms. How are we going to successfully move goods between the many states of Africa that are participating in the AFCFTA? So if I have 5 minutes, all I'm asking is, Minister, we have a case to build an inland port. Here is a case in terms of the number of goods that we are moving from Gauteng to Durban to Eastern Cape, here for exports, and this is why we need this particular inland port. That is also connected to the rail infrastructure, so that from that particular inland port we move straight to the ports.
Good, your wish is granted. Let me move to the left. asking the same question from a railway operator perspective. So there's so many opportunities at the moment. What's your 5 minutes wish to the minister from your perspective?
So, Johnny, I wouldn't be able to help a railway operator. Maybe we're not railway operators.
That's from that perspective.
So, the Minister of Transport and Minister of Finance.
So I think
it can be both, it can be one.
I think, obviously from the Minister of Transport, it's really a case of the ability, we have the ability to bring on modern rolling stock onto the network. We have the ability to refurbish a significant amount of the existing rolling stock whilst we're waiting for this lead time that exists on current new rolling stock. And during that time, one of the biggest impediments, as you pointed out, is the need to fix the network, to get the network working, but not just only in one region, in one country, but throughout the sub-Saharan region, so that we can have the seamless process of trains moving and being able to achieve the multiple objectives that we are looking at.
Thank you. Philippa said that she's handing over to me, so I'm going to be naughty. I'm going to take 2 questions from the audience. I hope we have roaming mics. Anybody's got a question? Just 2. Just going to take 2. I don't see any hands. Stephen, I can see you want to ask a question.
First of all, is to thank Anna for this very lively discussion. My question is to say whether the railway project, as far as I express what we've seen, are they packaged correctly, or can we say the business cases, are they convincing? Because maybe some of our projects do not see the light of day, because there are a lot of things we have to do to convince the financiers who may not be familiar, let's say general commercial banks, but people like maybe Tello more familiar about our situation, the way that we package, because we all know infrastructure or facilities, whether it be dry ports, it's a long-term investment. Therefore, you have to be prepared to recoup your investment, be patient. So, the question in short, how do we look in the packaging of our business cases? Thank you.
The second question is there at the back. I think if any of the 2 of you can answer that from a development finance perspective.
I'll start, maybe we can carry on. See that DBSA has committed already to many of those. I think what I started by saying is any lender wants to see how it gets repaid. I think from an ECA point of view, we long-term. We're there for 50 years. We are OECD, ECA, so we subscribe to the terms and conditions of the OECD rulings. And the maximum is 50 years, so we can't go longer than 50 years. Incidentally, renewable finance, so if you do green locomotives, they can go up to 22 years, but the norm will be 50 years, obviously, for this. So we're patient, but we want to see that it gets repaid. I think your business case and feasibility is very, very important. It needs to be well understood, it needs to be prepared by a company or individual that understands the banking side thereof too, that knows what the financiers and the bankers want to see. And I think if it's packaged suitably, but it's also a matter of understanding the market dynamics. And that's why I like to work with them to see how we can enhance it from an ECA point of view, from a rail point of view, etc. So, we're not prescriptive to say that we know everything. We want to learn, we want to see how it's done too. But I think your business case and your feasibility is very, very important. Because the bankers again, they see hundreds, if not thousands of those over the desk over a year. So it really needs to stand out.
Thank you. Willie?
Yes, I think just to add to that, I mean, it's really more about your, what you call market risk, right? What's your end market? So you can distinguish then between, passenger rail versus cargo, right? I mean, passenger rail, we know it's throughout the world, it's slightly more difficult in the sense that you can't really predict your traffic volumes, right? Or your passengers, right? So you find that all over the world, there is going to be an element of government support in terms of the gap or whatever, or any eventuality with regards to your market. However, if you look on the cargo side, I mean, the first key thing is your market. Where is your product going, right? And is that secure? So from our side as the DPS, we will ask you two things. Number one, we'll ask you whether you've got off-take agreements. If you don't, we know that it's quite difficult, especially at an early stage where you're still talking to potential off-takers, maybe you've got letters of interest and so forth. So it's quite difficult at the beginning. So we'll look at that, but we'll also say, ask you, have you done an independent market study, just to at least demonstrate that there is a market out there for the product. So we'll look at the two things, and I think that the DPSA, what we also have is what we call the project preparation division, which looks at assisting you, or it's a co-funding arrangement which looks at providing, call it a recovery grant, where we say, what Johnny's point earlier, where he said, you are going to need the services of a professional advisors. I mean, you are going to need technical advisor, you're going to need a financial advisor, and a legal advisor who can assist you in package the project to a level where you can say it's bankable. And you can not only just take it to the TFI, you can take it to a commercial level, you can take it to. So that is quite critical. And I think, for me, when I see it, I think that's where we tend to struggle with a lot of project sponsors, because you need that support. And that is why we at the GPS services, let us create this division which looks at thinking from your concept where you've done the feasibility study. So how do we get this bank to the point where it's well packaged? And I think that's quite critical. I mean, that division has been around since 2017, 2018, something. And it's really meant to be a function to assist you. So I would really maybe after this, if you can maybe talk a little bit more about
It's not enough business cards to say. There was a second question at the back. Is it still there?
Good afternoon, everybody. Here, what my colleague from former CEO of Swaziland saying, and what everybody else has been talking about. What we are seeing here is a reluctance by the banks to lend to the revenues. We've had discussions, we've had seminars from TBSA, from other institutions, but we don't seem to be cracking the nuts. Where are we going? What advice do you need to give us? Are the railways then doomed to failure in accessing the funding from the banks? We need an approach to show what is that approach. Because the railways are there, and social capital, there is business case, but we want to get railways from the big banks. Where are we going?
Yeah, I think let me take that one. So, for 5 years, I was running a state-owned entity, rail company in Namibia. And for 3 years of that 5 years, I went to different banks, knocking on the doors. And I can tell you, I had more than 150 meetings with bankers. I never gave up. But what is critical is you need to have a plan, number one. You need to persevere. And of course, you need to have your commercial contracts on hand, as was just said by DBSA. So the opportunity is there. That somebody must believe in you. You must have the faith to be moved, and you must have commitment from your government if you are a state-owned entity. I think those are some of the critical aspects. There's a lot more. I don't know whether anybody wants to add to that before I go to the last question.
Yes, maybe if I can just add to that, I think we have a contrary view to that, in the sense that the banks have expressed a willingness, extreme willingness, to be able to fund. It comes back to the question that was asked as to how you package the transaction. Because that's what's important for banking structure. So what they're looking for is really to make sure you have the offtake arrangements in place, you have the ability, the technical capability, the operating capability to ensure that you move that cargo, and that you have long-term access in terms of being able to operate on the line itself. And then banks are willing to partner, because the banks won't provide the full funding. There's an equity component required, which case we as leasing companies are able to provide that equity. So we have first-hand experience that we've been able to bring commercial banks to the table on a transaction. And one of the things they look for, as Dirk indicated, is certainty of payment. And the best way to achieve that is working through a ring-fence structures so that payments flow into that and then from there cascades into different parts of it. So that's about having a well-structured plan.
Thank you. There's one more question, which is the last question here to my left. Can we have a mic there?
Thank you very much. And I think I'll start from the beginning and then I'll zero in.
Please be brief, concise.
Thank you.
2 sentences most.
Wow, then I'll make them long sentences. I said I'll start from the beginning because I want to appreciate the presentations and statements which came from the ministers and chairpersons panel. That is to say, they reaffirmed the support and development of railway, your SADC railway industry, in a very unique way, and you'll see how I'm drawing down to the point. The regional examples of this commitment expressed from the various government statements and the projects which were presented. Basically, they presented over $15 billion of projects which are planned to be implemented in the next 10 years. An interesting example of that, which was made by Gibela, is one which perhaps brings in another different angle to look at funding the railway sector. We have been traditionally looking at funding the railway operators, but with a cluster planning approach, we have seen a long-term plan being financed and having confidence of financing for a sustainable period of time. That is the Gibela project, where you are bringing in the manufacturing sector as a target sector and giving the market that confidence of ready supply and at effective cost. What have the governments done with this project, and many which were presented? There's long-term investment commitment in the railway, and hence policy consistency is very, very important. The decision to create local jobs and industry by investing in railway industry makes financing cheaper in the long term. Policy consistency, and hence I'm pleading to the government's president, policy consistency also then incentivizes investment because it starts to work as an investment subsidy. Hence, the question now, and someone already mentioned on the panel that we need to go at it piece by piece, sometimes like you're eating an elephant. So the different modes of funding are there, but not all might be appropriate for the railway sector. PPP might be more appropriate with regard to manufacturers and how they supply the railway sector. And those are the components which make things happen in the railway industry. So whilst we have looked at projects amounting to $50 billion, perhaps we should say, can we commit to a SADC infrastructure master plan which is in the offing, which is going to be developed, so that we also look at long-term manufacturing sector for SADC, and we invest in that, so that we have it continental and we finance something that will be long-term and sustainable. Thank you, and I hope the finance experts can then look at it from that angle. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lupinda. We have a last question from DBSA, or maybe a comment.
Yeah, it's not a question, it's a comment. It hits my heart to hear one of the colleagues who said that they've been meeting us lenders and done nothing. I think when I presented in the morning, I gave examples. We've done let me go over again. We've done 2.6 billion for Transnami, based on their contracts only, not on their balance sheet. We are doing 3 billion for Botswana Rail, based on their contracts, no government guarantee. We are looking at CFM. I think my colleagues are looking almost committed $300 million. We are looking at Green Road, which is private sector, north of 7 billion. I'm talking figures that we are doing. So when somebody says GBSA will be talking to you and nothing is happening, I'm wondering, maybe you've been talking to wrong GBSA, not us. Thank you. I thought I should just clarify that.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. So maybe as a closure, because the train is 5 minutes late, I want to give the panel members just one sentence in conclusion from your side.
So as the earlier from GBSA has indicated, we have solutions in place that we can be innovative in working on particular transactions. No one transaction is the same. So access to rolling stock, yes, there are long lead times, but as a collective, working together as a collective, we will be able to solve the issues. Maybe not short term, we'll have short term solutions, but long term, we'll be able to address a significant amount of the rail problems.
Thank you.
I think I mentioned in my opening statement that without a proper regulatory environment, projects fail, investments fail. And my closing remark is that we should look into how do we improve the regulatory space, the regulatory environment within the rail sector along the entire value chain, so that we get to have projects implemented on time to enable more investments to come into the continent.
Thank you, Luke.
Thanks, Tony. I think for my side, I think my colleague covered it there, in saying that, look, we are there, we are available as the DBSA, effective many of these corridors. But I'm surprised when you didn't ask me what I would ask the minister if given 5 minutes. But I think for me, really, I would also like to comment what the minister is doing, that I mean, it was quite pleasing news in the morning we heard that there is actually a plan underway. I think that the DG laid out the roadmap quite well. There is a white paper that is out there in terms of security, infrastructure and operation. And it's news like that that is very pleasing to say, we are getting some, and for us as financiers as well, I mean, it also makes it easier when we see that there is the policy is also moving in the right direction to support both financiers, both operators, as well as the infrastructure. So yeah, I think for us, we are there, and I'm quite pleased with the consent.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think UKIP is committed to Africa as a continent, committed to the rail sector itself, and we would like to, enter into engagement and discussions. We won't be able to do everything for everyone, but I think we need to focus on what we can do and start doing it.
So, in conclusion, we said the wallet is there. The size of the wallet is quite big. We said the recipe is there. It is just about how do we go about it. So I think there's really 3 levels here. You need to have a plan. You need to engage, and you need to re-engage and engage and re-engage until it happens in terms of implementation. So that's really the three options in terms of moving forward. And this is the way that we will eat this elephant. I've always said that the railway sector is already perceived as very complex. So how do we simplify it? And that's what we need to focus on. Simplify it, cut it in pieces, and then that's how we move forward. So I would like to thank the panelists for their positive contributions and also for the audience. Thank you.